Greetings and welcome to another edition of Tuesday Tips with Tim. I'm Tim King with Offix Lynchburg, and today we're going to be talking about end of lease options. Now, we've had one or two new Offix customers run into a little bit of trouble when moving away from their current vendor or their current leasing company, namely due to not understanding what their end of lease options were and what those terms and conditions were. So we're going to talk about some of the basics today, like what are the different types of leases and what each end of lease option might look like, in addition to some additional terms and conditions you may run into. The first lease we're going to discuss is called a fair market value lease, also known as an operational lease. Now, this is the lease that the majority of companies out there have on their equipment. The reason why it's called a fair market value lease is that's your end of lease purchase option, meaning you can either upgrade the equipment with your current vendor, return the equipment to the leasing company if you've moved on to a new vendor or your needs have changed, or purchase the equipment for the fair market value or depreciated value of your equipment at the time of the lease's end. Now, financially, this is not what that lease is really designed for. The reason it's an operational lease is it's designed to either upgrade your equipment to newer equipment or return your equipment if your needs have changed. Typically, the customer will upgrade their copier to keep their operational costs low, either with their current vendor or with a new vendor. This is this lease's intended purpose. This also has the most complications at the end of the lease, depending on who your vendor partners with in a leasing company. So let's dive into a little more as to what the end of lease options look like on our fair market value lease. The last leasing option we're going to talk about is a dollar buyout lease, also known as a capital lease. Now, the reason why this is called a dollar buyout lease is this, again, is your end of lease purchase option. Now, a dollar buyout lease is essentially financing to own your piece of equipment. The monthly lease payment is much higher than a fair market value lease, but at the end of the lease, you essentially own the equipment by simply paying $1. Now, these leases have far less restrictive end of lease options, but again, it's still important to review your lease terms and conditions and still provide your letter of intent to that leasing company. Now, the companies that use dollar buyout leases are typically leasing things that do not need to be upgraded as often. So older used equipment for very low volume customers or wide format equipment that is doing a lower volume and is designed to last a bit longer than the upgraded needs of your typical office copier. There's another great video on our YouTube channel about the difference between a capital and a operational lease. I recommend you check that out. But in the meantime, if you'd like to know more about your leasing options for your current device or your current vendor, sign up for a free lease review today with your local Offix representative. You can reach us at marketing@offix.com. That's marketing@offix.com. And always like and follow our socials, and we'll see you next week. The most important thing to know on a fair market value lease and the lease options is your lease notification window. A lease notification window is the time period towards the end of your lease in which you have to provide what's called a letter of intent. The letter of intent tells the leasing company if you intend to return the equipment or purchase the equipment off the lease. Now, this is very important because each leasing company has their own leasing notification window. On average, leasing companies want your letter of intent within 90 days of the end of your lease. If they don't receive that within that 90-day period, some companies impose what's called an evergreen clause. An evergreen clause means that company can then automatically renew your lease without at least intent notice, the letter of intent, either a period of 90, 120, or most often a full another year on that lease if they do not receive your letter of intent. Now, it is important to partner with a company that does not impose evergreen clauses. Offix does not believe nor partner with evergreen clause leases. The other important part of your lease notification window is how early you can pay off that lease. A lot of times, leasing companies will only allow you to provide that letter of intent within that 90-day window. If you try to provide a letter of intent and upgrade your equipment early, they're going to force you to purchase that equipment because they don't want you to leave. Again, it's important to partner with the right company that offers the right leasing companies. Lastly, we'll discuss about the fair market value lease is your purchase option. Typically, the fair market value purchase option is going to be a depreciated amount of the equipment. So again, this is not really designed, or this lease is not typically designed for you to own the equipment at the end. It's ideal for you to upgrade the equipment with the right vendor. I highly recommend you review your lease options with your local Offix sales rep. They'd be happy to do a free lease review and discuss and review the terms and conditions of your current lease with you so that you know what your options are.